My wife told me I was being emotionally immature when I found out about her intimate sessions with Preston at work. I'm a software architect, 32 years old, and I've always prided myself on logical thinking and methodical problem solving, but nothing in my professional experience had prepared me for the moment I discovered my wife of 6 years was providing therapeutic comfort to another man in ways that violated every boundary I thought we had established in our marriage. It happened completely by accident on a Thursday evening in March when I decided to surprise Valerie by picking her up from her marketing firm's downtown San Francisco office instead of letting her take the usual rideshare home during rush hour traffic. I had finished debugging a complex algorithm earlier than expected and thought it would be nice to spend the drive home talking about our weekend plans for wine tasting in Sonoma County, something we used to enjoy together before her work schedule became increasingly demanding and her attention started drifting toward workplace relationships that seemed to energize her more than our conversations about mutual goals and shared interests. When I arrived at her office building around 6:30, the security guard directed me to the 14th floor where the marketing department maintains several conference rooms and collaborative workspaces that employees often used for late-day meetings and project planning sessions. I took the elevator up and walked through the glass-walled corridor toward Valerie's office, expecting to find her finishing up client presentations or reviewing campaign materials for the luxury real estate accounts that had been consuming most of her professional focus for the past several months. Instead, what I saw through the transparent conference room walls stopped me completely in my tracks and forced me to question everything I thought I understood about the woman I had married and the relationship we had been building together for over half a decade. Valerie was lying on the carpeted floor of Conference Room C with Preston Matthews, her department colleague who had joined the company about 8 months earlier and had quickly established himself as someone who needed constant emotional support and validation from female coworkers who found his sensitivity and vulnerability appealing compared to the typical corporate masculine personalities they encountered in their professional environment. They were positioned in what could only be described as an intimate embrace, with Preston's head resting against Valerie's chest while she stroked his hair and whispered words I couldn't hear through the glass barrier that separated the hallway from their private therapeutic session. The scene lasted for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds before they shifted positions and began sitting up, apparently preparing to end whatever healing ritual they had been conducting during company hours in a space that was supposed to be reserved for legitimate business activities and professional collaboration. I stood there watching this unfold, my analytical mind immediately cataloging the details that would prove significant later, the way Valerie's hand lingered on Preston's shoulder as they separated, the intimate positioning of their bodies that suggested this wasn't their first time engaging in this type of physical comfort arrangement, and most importantly, the complete absence of any apparent guilt or concern about being discovered by colleagues who might question whether their behavior was appropriate for a workplace environment. When I knocked on the conference room door, they both looked up with expressions that revealed everything I needed to know about their awareness that what they were doing crossed professional boundaries and violated the trust of Preston's girlfriend Michelle and my marriage to Valerie. Preston immediately started gathering his things and mumbling apologies about losing track of time during their therapeutic discussion, while Valerie smoothed her hair and adjusted her clothing with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times before and knew exactly how to transition from intimate contact back to professional appearances. That evening at home, when I asked Valerie to explain what I had witnessed in the conference room, she didn't deny the physical contact or try to claim it was something innocent that I had misinterpreted through the distortion of glass walls and partial observation. Instead, she launched into an elaborate justification about Preston's anxiety disorders and panic attacks that required immediate intervention from colleagues who understood somatic healing techniques and therapeutic touch methodologies. According to her detailed explanation, Preston had been experiencing workplace stress that triggered severe emotional episodes where his nervous system became dysregulated and required specific types of physical comfort to restore his psychological equilibrium and prevent complete mental breakdown that could affect his professional performance and career advancement opportunities. She described their sessions as necessary medical interventions disguised as friendly support, claiming that Preston's previous therapists had recommended that he seek out empathetic colleagues who could provide grounding techniques through gentle physical contact when traditional coping mechanisms failed to address his acute anxiety symptoms. When I expressed discomfort with my wife regularly cuddling with another man during work hours, she immediately shifted tactics and accused me of demonstrating toxic masculinity and emotional immaturity that prevented me from understanding the evolved nature of their therapeutic relationship. She weaponized psychology terminology she had absorbed from wellness podcasts and self-help books, explaining that my jealousy and possessiveness represented outdated patriarchal conditioning that interfered with her ability to help heal wounded souls who needed feminine energy to restore their psychological balance. According to her increasingly passionate defense, Preston embodied a new model of enlightened masculinity that wasn't ashamed to seek emotional support from women, unlike traditional men who had been socialized to suppress vulnerability and maintain rigid boundaries that prevented authentic human connection. She told me that my inability to celebrate her role as an emotional healer revealed my own stunted development and need for professional therapy to address control issues that were preventing our relationship from evolving beyond primitive possessiveness into something more spiritually advanced. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Valerie explaining how their connection transcended physical boundaries because their intentions were pure and focused on emotional restoration rather than sexual gratification, and how my discomfort proved that I needed to examine my own insecurities and trust issues that were preventing me from supporting her personal growth as a compassionate human being capable of offering healing to those who needed it most. I had spent 4 months meticulously planning Valerie's 35th birthday celebration, investing $6,500 in what I thought would be the perfect weekend to reconnect and strengthen our marriage that had been slowly deteriorating under the pressure of her increasingly demanding work schedule and her growing emotional investment in Preston's psychological well-being. The planning had become my obsession during evenings and weekends, a project that consumed my free time as I researched exclusive wine tastings at boutique vineyards in Napa Valley, contacted Michelin-starred restaurants to arrange private dining experiences with renowned chefs, and coordinated luxury spa retreats that promised couples rejuvenation packages complete with therapeutic massage sessions, meditation workshops, and romantic accommodation in suites overlooking the Pacific coastline. I had spent countless hours on the phone with concierge services, event coordinators, and reservation managers, explaining exactly what I wanted to create for my wife's milestone birthday celebration and sparing no expense to ensure that every detail would exceed her expectations and demonstrate my commitment to making her feel cherished and prioritized in our relationship. The comprehensive itinerary I had developed included helicopter tours over the Golden Gate Bridge with professional photography services to capture our romantic moments against the backdrop of San Francisco's iconic skyline, private sommelier experiences where we would taste rare vintage wines that cost more per bottle than most people spend on their monthly grocery budget, and weekend getaways to coastal resorts where we could enjoy couples massage treatments, gourmet cooking classes with celebrity chefs, and intimate jazz performances in venues that seated fewer than 50 guests and required personal recommendations from existing patrons to secure reservations. Every single reservation had been researched with the same methodical attention to detail that I applied to software architecture projects, complete with backup options, alternative timing arrangements, and contingency plans in case any component of the celebration encountered unexpected complications or availability issues. I had created detailed spreadsheets tracking confirmation numbers, contact information for vendors, timing requirements for each activity, and specific dietary preferences that needed to be communicated to restaurants and catering services to ensure that Valerie's experience would be seamless and luxurious from beginning to end. What I failed to recognize during those 4 months of intensive planning was how dramatically and fundamentally Valerie's relationship with Preston had evolved from casual workplace collaboration to something that was consuming increasing amounts of her emotional energy, intellectual focus, and physical availability in ways that were systematically replacing the intimacy and connection she had previously shared with me as her husband and primary romantic partner. Their professional interactions had progressed far beyond the typical colleague relationships that develop naturally in corporate environments, transforming into something that resembled a secondary romantic partnership disguised as therapeutic friendship and emotional support system. Preston had become the primary recipient of Valerie's attention during work hours, lunch breaks, and increasingly during evening hours when she would receive urgent text messages about his anxiety episodes that required immediate emotional intervention through lengthy phone conversations that stretched well past midnight and interfered with our own conversations about daily experiences, future planning, and relationship maintenance. I would lie in bed listening to her whisper reassurances and affirmations through our bedroom wall at 2 a.m, promising Preston that she would always be available when he needed someone to talk him through panic attacks, social anxiety, and workplace stress that seemed to occur with suspicious frequency and always required her specific type of emotional support rather than professional counseling or medical intervention from qualified mental health practitioners. Her phone had become a constant source of distraction during our time together, buzzing with messages that she would read with the kind of focused attention and emotional investment that she used to reserve for important conversations with me about our shared goals, financial planning, home improvement projects, and vacation planning that had once been collaborative decisions requiring mutual input and consideration. She had developed new habits around her phone usage that created barriers between us during meals, television watching, and even intimate moments when she would check messages with an urgency that suggested Preston's emotional needs took precedence over our relationship maintenance and quality time together. I noticed that she smiled at her phone screen with expressions of genuine warmth and affection when reading his messages, displaying the kind of emotional responsiveness and engagement that had become increasingly rare in our face-to-face interactions, where she seemed distracted, impatient, and focused on other priorities that didn't include strengthening our marriage or addressing the growing distance between us. During this same period when their emotional intimacy was deepening and expanding beyond professional boundaries, I maintained my composure and continued focusing on the birthday celebration planning because I genuinely believed that once we had dedicated, uninterrupted time together away from work pressures, social media distractions, and Preston's constant emotional crises, we could rediscover the foundation of attraction, compatibility, and shared vision that had brought us together initially, and sustained our relationship through previous challenges and life transitions. I thought that creating the perfect romantic experience filled with luxury activities, thoughtful gestures, and opportunities for intimate conversation would remind Valerie why she had chosen to build a life with me rather than pursuing other options, and that the elaborate celebration would serve as a reset button for our relationship that had been neglected due to competing priorities and insufficient attention to relationship maintenance and emotional connection. The conversation that completely shattered my remaining illusions about our marriage happened on a Thursday evening in early April while I was preparing gourmet pasta with truffle oil and wild mushrooms, attempting to create another romantic dinner experience in our increasingly distant and emotionally disconnected relationship that had become characterized by polite conversation rather than genuine intimacy and mutual engagement. Valerie walked into our kitchen with that distinctive post-work glow that I had foolishly attributed to professional accomplishment and career satisfaction, when she casually mentioned that she had spent 2 hours that afternoon lying with Preston in the company's meditation room during what she described as his most severe anxiety episode yet, requiring extended physical comfort and emotional support to prevent what could have been a complete psychological breakdown that might have required emergency medical intervention or psychiatric hospitalization. I stopped stirring the truffle oil sauce and asked her to explain exactly what she meant by lying with him for 2 hours, thinking surely there had to be some professional context or therapeutic framework I was missing that would make this sound like reasonable workplace behavior rather than the intimate physical contact that her casual description suggested. She proceeded to provide a detailed account of how she had discovered Preston hyperventilating and experiencing what appeared to be a panic attack in the meditation room during her lunch break, and had decided to implement somatic healing techniques she had learned from wellness podcasts and alternative therapy websites, which apparently involved lying down together on the floor mats while she held his head against her chest and guided his breathing back to normal patterns through extended physical contact and whispered reassurances about his worth and emotional strength. According to her increasingly elaborate explanation, she had cradled his head in her lap for the first hour while practicing breathing exercises together, then transitioned to a full-body embrace where his head rested against her chest while she stroked his hair and whispered affirmations about his courage, sensitivity, and emotional intelligence until his nervous system returned to a state of calm and equilibrium that allowed him to function normally for the remainder of the workday. She described their positioning with clinical detachment, as if she were explaining a medical procedure rather than acknowledging that she had spent 2 hours in intimate physical contact with another man while her husband was at work, believing she was attending client meetings and focusing on professional responsibilities rather than providing therapeutic services that should have been handled by trained mental health professionals. When I expressed shock and discomfort that she thought this was appropriate workplace behavior for a married woman, she immediately launched into an elaborate defensive strategy that combined New Age spirituality with pop psychology terminology to justify their physical intimacy as a necessary intervention for someone who embodied evolved masculinity and represented the future of human emotional intelligence. She explained that Preston's willingness to seek emotional support and physical comfort from women demonstrated a level of vulnerability and authenticity that distinguished him from traditional men who had been conditioned by toxic masculinity to suppress their feelings, maintain rigid emotional boundaries, and avoid the kind of authentic human connection that could facilitate genuine healing and personal growth. According to Valerie's increasingly passionate and philosophical explanation, Preston represented a new model of enlightened masculinity that wasn't afraid to acknowledge emotional needs, seek comfort from compassionate women, and participate in healing relationships that transcended the primitive jealousy and possessiveness that characterized traditional marriages and romantic partnerships. She told me that my discomfort with their therapeutic sessions revealed my own internalized toxic masculinity and emotional immaturity, explaining that my jealousy and territorial behavior prevented me from understanding that true intimacy could exist between men and women without sexual intentions when the purpose was pure healing and emotional restoration rather than physical gratification or romantic competition. She suggested that I needed immediate professional therapy to address my control issues, insecurity problems, and outdated beliefs about relationship boundaries that were preventing our marriage from evolving into something more spiritually advanced and emotionally sophisticated than the possessive partnership model that had been imposed by patriarchal social conditioning. The conversation reached its most infuriating peak when she told me that Preston had confided in her about how emotionally stunted and psychologically primitive most men were compared to women like her who understood the sacred nature of feminine healing energy and the importance of nurturing wounded masculine souls back to wholeness through unconditional acceptance, physical comfort, and spiritual guidance that required intimate physical contact to be truly effective. She claimed that my inability to comprehend and celebrate their special transcendent connection represented a personal failing that required immediate professional intervention if I wanted to evolve enough to remain worthy of her continued presence in my life, suggesting that she was considering whether our marriage could survive my emotional limitations and resistance to personal growth. As she spoke with increasing conviction and self-righteousness about their healing relationship and my deficiencies as an evolved partner, I realized that she had completely rewritten reality to cast herself as a spiritual healer and compassionate guide while positioning me as an obstacle to human progress, emotional evolution, and the kind of advanced relationship dynamics that enlightened people could achieve when they moved beyond primitive concepts like marital fidelity and exclusive emotional commitment. Instead of escalating the confrontation or demanding that Valerie choose between Preston and our marriage in some dramatic ultimatum that would only reinforce her perception of me as a controlling and emotionally primitive husband who didn't understand evolved relationship dynamics, I made the strategic decision to completely agree with her perspective and apologize profusely for my emotional immaturity, toxic masculine responses, and failure to appreciate her compassionate healing work with wounded souls who needed feminine energy to restore their psychological balance and spiritual equilibrium. I told her that she was absolutely right about my need for professional therapy to address my possessiveness issues and personal growth deficits, and that I wanted to become the kind of evolved partner who could celebrate her role as an emotional healer rather than feeling threatened by her ability to provide comfort and guidance to sensitive men like Preston who represented the future of enlightened masculinity. The relief and satisfaction on her face when I capitulated completely to her narrative was both illuminating and absolutely disgusting, but I maintained my apologetic demeanor and supportive response while internally calculating the most effective way to demonstrate exactly what losing me and my financial support would actually cost her in terms of lifestyle, social status, and the elaborate birthday celebration that she had been anticipating for months. I spent that entire sleepless night systematically researching the cancellation policies, penalty fees, and refund deadlines for every single reservation, booking, and prepaid experience I had arranged for her birthday celebration, taking detailed notes on the specific procedures required to terminate each contract without leaving myself financially liable for her public humiliation while ensuring maximum embarrassment when she discovered that her perfect weekend had been systematically dismantled. The following morning, while Valerie was at work presumably providing more therapeutic comfort and healing energy to Preston during his ongoing emotional crises, I began methodically dismantling every aspect of the elaborate celebration I had spent 4 months planning and $6,500 financing through careful research, vendor negotiations, and coordination of logistics that had consumed my evenings and weekends for the better part of half a year. I started with the most exclusive and expensive reservations, calling the Michelin-starred restaurants to cancel our private dining experiences and specifically requesting that they note the reason as client relationship terminated due to changed personal circumstances, knowing that this professional terminology would create questions and embarrassment when Valerie arrived expecting to be celebrated and the reservation details were inevitably discussed with management and service staff who would need to explain why their table was no longer available. I contacted the luxury spa resort in Mendocino to cancel our couple's rejuvenation package that included overnight accommodation in their premium Ocean View suite, therapeutic massage treatments, meditation workshops, and gourmet breakfast service, ensuring that the cancellation was processed with the same professional language that would maximize Valerie's humiliation when her group arrived expecting to enjoy the luxury experience she had been promoting to her friends on social media for weeks. The helicopter tour company required 48 hours notice for cancellations without penalty, so I called them immediately to cancel our Golden Gate Bridge scenic flight and professional photography session, and the private sommelier who had been scheduled to guide us through rare vintage wine tastings at an exclusive Napa Valley estate that required personal recommendations and advance payment for the tasting experience. Each cancellation was processed with meticulous attention to detail and professional documentation that would ensure Valerie's maximum embarrassment when she discovered that her carefully planned celebration had been systematically destroyed by the husband she had dismissed as emotionally primitive and possessively controlling. While I was orchestrating the destruction of her birthday weekend, I simultaneously withdrew my contributions from our shared savings account where I had been depositing funds for home improvement projects and vacation planning, closed the joint credit card that I had been using to fund her lifestyle expenses and shopping habits, and transferred all available funds to my individual accounts while documenting every transaction with timestamps and screenshots for my own financial protection and legal documentation. I contacted the corporate housing facility near my office to secure a furnished studio apartment with immediate availability, explaining that I needed temporary accommodation due to personal circumstances that required privacy and independence while I navigated a significant life transition that might take several months to resolve completely. I spent my lunch break systematically removing my personal belongings from our shared home while Valerie was at work, taking only my clothes, electronics, important documents, family photographs, and sentimental items that belonged exclusively to me while leaving behind everything we had purchased together, including furniture, kitchen appliances, artwork, and decorative items that would only remind me of the relationship I was abandoning rather than fighting to preserve against her betrayal. And emotional manipulation. I changed my direct deposit information to reflect my new address, updated my emergency contacts to remove her name from all professional and medical accounts, and modified my insurance beneficiaries to ensure that Valerie would have no financial access or legal claims to my assets if something unexpected happened to me during this transition period when I was extracting myself from a marriage that had become financially and emotionally abusive. The precision and thoroughness of my strategic withdrawal felt exactly like designing a complex software system architecture project, except instead of building something functional and valuable, I was systematically deconstructing the infrastructure that had supported her entitled lifestyle, emotional manipulation tactics, and financial dependency on my income and planning abilities. I left no trace of my preparation or intentions, maintaining normal conversation and affectionate behavior when we interacted that evening, even going so far as to ask about her day at work and whether Preston was feeling better after his anxiety episode, knowing that she interpreted my questions as evidence that I was accepting her therapeutic relationship and evolving into the kind of supportive partner she claimed to need for her personal growth and spiritual development. Valerie arrived at the exclusive Chateau Montclair Vineyard restaurant on Saturday evening with her carefully curated entourage of girlfriends, all dressed in their most expensive outfits for what they expected would be an Instagram-worthy celebration of luxury and sophistication that would reinforce Valerie's status as someone whose husband spared no expense for her happiness and whose lifestyle represented the kind of romantic partnership that other women envied and aspired to achieve in their own relationships. The restaurant was located in an elegant historic building in downtown San Francisco, known for its intimate private dining rooms, extensive wine collection, and clientele of tech executives, venture capitalists, and celebrities who valued discretion and exceptional service above all else. I can only imagine the confusion and growing panic on Valerie's face when the hostess informed their party of 5 women that their $800 wine tasting reservation, which included a private dining room overlooking the city skyline and a personal sommelier to guide them through rare vintage tastings paired with artisanal cheese selections and gourmet hors d'oeuvres, had been cancelled with the notation clearly visible in the restaurant's computer system stating client relationship terminated due to changed personal circumstances effective immediately with no possibility of reinstatement. The humiliation compounded exponentially when her friends witnessed the professional but firm explanation from the restaurant manager that the private dining room they had reserved for the evening was no longer available under any circumstances, that no alternative arrangements had been made or requested, and that the cancellation had been processed according to standard procedures with proper documentation and authorization from the person who had originally made the reservation and provided payment information. The group was forced to either leave immediately and find alternative dining arrangements elsewhere, or settle for whatever tables might be available in the main restaurant area like ordinary walk-in customers without special treatment, preferential seating, or the exclusive wine tasting experience that Valerie had been promoting to her friends for weeks as evidence of her husband's devotion and financial generosity. I was safely ensconced in a luxury mountain retreat cabin 3 hours north of the city, having used some of the money I had saved from canceling her elaborate celebration to book myself a peaceful weekend of hiking, reading, and solitude while monitoring the catastrophe I had orchestrated through the increasingly frantic text messages that started arriving on my phone around 7:30 that evening as Valerie's perfect birthday weekend began its spectacular collapse. The first message claimed there had been some kind of mistake or computer error with their dinner reservation and asked if I could call the restaurant immediately to straighten out the confusion, followed by increasingly desperate and panicked messages as each planned activity fell through in succession and her friends began piecing together that this wasn't a series of unfortunate coincidental mishaps but rather a deliberate and calculated destruction of everything she had been anticipating and promoting to her social circle for months. The helicopter tour company apologetically informed Valerie's group the next morning that their scenic flight over the Golden Gate Bridge, which was supposed to include professional photography services and champagne service during the aerial tour, had been cancelled with proper 24-hour advance notice as requested by the client who had originally booked and paid for the experience, and when she demanded to speak with a manager about what she insisted was an error or unauthorized cancellation, they professionally explained that the cancellation had been processed correctly according to their standard procedures with proper documentation, authorization codes, and client identification verification. Her social media posts from that weekend told the complete story of her public humiliation better than any revenge fantasy I could have possibly imagined, starting with excited anticipation selfies and group photos at the restaurant entrance with captions about celebrating another year of life and feeling grateful for amazing friends and an incredible husband who knew how to treat a woman properly. The posts progressed through increasingly confused and frustrated status updates about unexpected changes to their plans, technical difficulties with reservations, and mysterious cancellations that seemed to be affecting every aspect of their celebration weekend. finally culminating in barely concealed fury and embarrassment as she realized that her perfect birthday celebration had been systematically demolished while her carefully cultivated friend group watched her image as a cherished and spoiled wife crumble in real time before their eyes. The luxury spa resort cancellation became apparent on Sunday morning when Valerie's group arrived at the Mendocino Coast facility for their couple's rejuvenation packages, expecting to enjoy therapeutic massage treatments, meditation workshops, gourmet meals, and overnight accommodation in premium ocean view suites that had been specifically selected for their Instagram-worthy views and high-end amenities that would reinforce Valerie's social media presence as someone who lived a lifestyle of luxury and romance. Instead, they discovered that their entire weekend booking had been terminated with the same professional notation about changed client circumstances, leaving them standing in the resort lobby with their luggage and weekend plans in ruins while other guests checked in around them to enjoy the luxury treatments and romantic accommodations that Valerie had been promising her friends for weeks as the highlight of their birthday celebration weekend. I watched her Instagram stories evolve throughout the weekend from confident poses at expensive locations with captions about feeling blessed and grateful, to increasingly frantic attempts to salvage some semblance of celebration through backup plans and alternative activities. But every attempt she made to implement alternative arrangements only highlighted how completely dependent she had become on my financial support and planning abilities for maintaining her lifestyle and social status. Among her equally superficial friend group who were now witnessing her complete inability to provide the luxury experiences she had promised them or to solve problems independently when her original plans fell through unexpectedly. While Valerie was dealing with the complete public humiliation and social embarrassment of her cancelled birthday celebration, watching her carefully constructed image as a pampered and cherished wife crumble in front of her closest friends who had expected to enjoy luxury experiences that would reinforce their own aspirations for romantic partnerships that prioritize their happiness and comfort above all other considerations, I implemented the second phase of my strategic response by contacting Preston's long-term partner Michelle with carefully documented evidence of their workplace intimacy sessions and ongoing emotional affair that had been systematically destroying our marriage while being disguised as therapeutic healing and professional collaboration. I had methodically compiled screenshots of Valerie's text messages describing their physical contact in explicit detail, recorded portions of conversations where she explained their intimate positioning during anxiety episodes, and created a comprehensive timeline of their relationship progression that painted an undeniable picture of inappropriate workplace behavior that violated both professional boundaries and basic relationship ethics that any reasonable person would expect their romantic partner to maintain regardless of therapeutic justifications or spiritual explanations. Michelle Rodriguez was a dedicated pediatric nurse who worked demanding 12-hour shifts at San Francisco Children's Hospital, often dealing with critically ill children and families experiencing the most stressful situations imaginable, and she had absolutely no idea that her boyfriend of 3 years was spending his comfortable marketing job workdays receiving intimate comfort sessions from married colleagues who justified their behavior as emotional healing, somatic therapy, and advanced relationship dynamics that transcended traditional boundaries. When I contacted Michelle and showed her the documented evidence of Preston and Valerie lying together in conference rooms, meditation spaces, and empty offices during work hours while engaging in extended physical contact that included head cradling, chest embracing, hair stroking, and whispered affirmations that lasted for hours at a time, her reaction was swift, decisive, and absolutely devastating for both Preston and Valerie in ways that exceeded my most optimistic expectations for natural consequences. Michelle immediately confronted Preston with photographic evidence, text message documentation, and witness accounts that made denial impossible, demanding that he end his inappropriate workplace relationships immediately or face the permanent termination of their romantic partnership and shared living arrangement that had been built on trust, mutual respect, and exclusive emotional commitment that he had been systematically violating. Preston's response to Michelle's confrontation revealed exactly the kind of man he actually was beneath his carefully constructed facade of sensitive and evolved masculinity that had been so appealing to Valerie and other female colleagues who mistook his emotional neediness for genuine vulnerability and his manipulation tactics for authentic connection and spiritual depth. Instead of accepting responsibility for his behavior, acknowledging the hurt he had caused Michelle, and apologizing for betraying her trust while maintaining an emotional and physical affair with a married colleague, Preston immediately panicked and threw Valerie completely under the bus to protect his own relationship and professional reputation from the consequences of their inappropriate workplace intimacy. He contacted their company's human resources department within 24 hours of Michelle's ultimatum and filed formal harassment claims against Valerie, claiming that she had been pursuing him inappropriately for months despite his repeated requests for professional boundaries, and that her insistence on providing physical comfort during his anxiety episodes had created a hostile work environment where he felt pressured to accept unwanted contact because he was afraid that refusing her advances would damage his career prospects and professional relationships. The absolute irony and vindictive brilliance of Preston portraying himself as the victim of Valerie's advances, when she had been describing him to me as an evolved man who appreciated her healing abilities and represented the future of enlightened masculinity, was so perfect that I couldn't have designed a better outcome if I had orchestrated the entire scenario myself. Preston's false harassment claims were taken seriously by their company's legal department because they had to investigate all allegations of inappropriate workplace behavior, and within 2 weeks Valerie lost her marketing director position when the human resources investigation discovered that Preston's allegations were supported by security footage from conference rooms and meditation spaces, witness statements from colleagues who had observed their inappropriate behavior during work hours, and Valerie's own admissions during investigative interviews that she had been providing Preston with physical comfort and emotional support that clearly exceeded normal professional boundaries and violated multiple company policies. Her attempts to defend their relationship as therapeutic, spiritually necessary, and representative of advanced human connection only reinforced the company's conclusion that she had created a hostile work environment by engaging in behavior that made other employees uncomfortable and violated explicit policies regarding appropriate workplace conduct, professional relationships, and maintaining boundaries that protected all employees from unwanted physical contact. The scandal spread through her professional network faster than she could control the narrative or manage her reputation, because Preston's harassment claims were taken seriously by industry contacts who had witnessed their relationship development at networking events, professional conferences, and client meetings where they had displayed obvious intimacy that everyone had assumed was consensual workplace romance rather than predatory behavior disguised as therapeutic intervention. Meanwhile, I was thriving in my new independence, advancing rapidly in my career, and building meaningful personal relationships without the constant stress, emotional manipulation, and financial drain that had characterized the final months of my marriage to someone who had lost all respect for boundaries, commitment, and basic partnership principles that form the foundation of healthy romantic relationships. 8 months after my strategic withdrawal from Valerie's life and the systematic destruction of the entitled lifestyle she had taken for granted while pursuing her therapeutic relationship with Preston, I encountered her at the annual Pacific Technology Conference where I was presenting my team's breakthrough financial modeling software to potential investors, venture capital firms, and industry leaders who had specifically requested demonstrations of the innovative algorithms and machine learning applications that had positioned our company as a leader in fintech development and secured substantial funding for future expansion projects. She appeared at my presentation booth during the networking session looking completely exhausted and professionally diminished, wearing a discount business suit that was clearly purchased off the rack rather than tailored to fit properly, and carrying a worn leather portfolio that contained dozens of resumes, business cards, and marketing materials she was desperately distributing to anyone who would acknowledge her presence at the networking sessions where unemployed professionals attempted to make connections that might lead to interview opportunities. The confident marketing director who had once lectured me about emotional evolution, therapeutic healing, and my need for professional therapy to address my toxic masculinity and control issues had been replaced by someone who looked like she hadn't slept properly in months, with dark circles under her eyes, nervous energy that screamed desperation to anyone observing her interactions with potential employers and industry contacts, and the defeated posture of someone whose carefully constructed professional reputation had been systematically destroyed by consequences she never anticipated when she chose temporary excitement over long-term stability. She approached me during a break between presentations with that familiar manipulative smile that used to work so effectively when she needed something from me, whether it was money for shopping trips, emotional support for her various crises, or validation for decisions that prioritized her immediate gratification over our relationship maintenance and future planning. But now the smile appeared forced and transparently calculated rather than naturally charming or genuinely affectionate. She started our conversation by congratulating me on my obvious professional success, the impressive presentation I had delivered to a standing room-only audience of industry experts, and the visible indicators that my career had advanced significantly since she had last seen me when I was supposedly emotionally stunted and resistant to personal growth. Then she transitioned into elaborate claims that Preston had manipulated and deceived her into believing their relationship was something meaningful and spiritually significant when he had actually been using her vulnerability, compassion, and desire to help wounded souls against her for his own selfish purposes and emotional gratification without any genuine appreciation for her healing abilities or commitment to evolving into a more enlightened version of masculinity. According to her completely revised narrative that conveniently absolved her of all responsibility for the choices she had made during our marriage, she had been the victim of Preston's emotional manipulation rather than an equal participant in their workplace intimacy sessions. And she begged me to reconsider our relationship because she had learned valuable lessons about recognizing toxic people who exploit others under the guise of sensitivity and emotional intelligence. She promised that if I would give her another chance to prove herself as a worthy partner, she would be completely different from the woman who had prioritized another man's emotional needs over her husband's feelings and would never again allow herself to be deceived by men who pretended to need healing when they actually just wanted attention and validation from women who cared too much about helping wounded souls recover from their psychological damage. I listened to her entire desperate monologue without interrupting, watching her cycle through every manipulation technique she had ever used on me, from tears and apologies that were calculated to generate sympathy, to promises of transformation that were designed to make me believe she had fundamentally changed, to subtle threats that I would regret losing her forever if I didn't recognize this opportunity to rebuild something stronger and more authentic than what we had shared before her. Therapeutic adventures destroyed our marriage. When she finished her performance, which included references to therapy sessions where she had supposedly gained insight into her mistakes and professional counseling that had helped her understand how Preston had exploited her generous nature, I calmly explained that she had lost privileges she had never properly valued and that our entire relationship had been built on her perception of me as a financial security provider rather than an equal partner deserving respect and consideration. I told her that she had treated me like a human ATM whose feelings were irrelevant as long as the money continued flowing to support her lifestyle and social media image, and that her current desperation stemmed from losing access to the comfortable standard of living I had funded rather than genuine remorse for the emotional damage she had caused through her betrayal and manipulation tactics. At that moment, Rachel approached our conversation area with 2 cups of coffee and a warm smile that immediately demonstrated the difference between someone who genuinely cared about my well-being and wanted to support my professional success versus someone who saw me as a resource to be exploited for personal gain and lifestyle maintenance. Rachel was a brilliant software engineer who had joined my development team 6 months earlier and had quickly become both my most valued professional colleague and my romantic partner. Someone who appreciated my technical expertise and leadership abilities while contributing equally to our relationship through her own career achievements, intellectual curiosity, and emotional maturity that made every conversation stimulating and every shared experience genuinely enjoyable. As I introduced Rachel to Valerie, I watched my ex-wife's face process the reality that I had not only moved on completely but had found someone who represented everything she had failed to be during our marriage. Someone who valued direct communication and mutual respect rather than manipulation and emotional games designed to extract maximum benefit with minimum reciprocal investment in the relationship's success and longevity. Rachel embodied the qualities that Valerie had always claimed to possess but never actually demonstrated: independence, professional competence, emotional stability, and genuine partnership rather than parasitic dependency disguised as romantic love. I walked away with Rachel toward the investor meeting that would determine the future funding for our software development project, leaving Valerie standing alone in a crowded conference hall surrounded by successful professionals who had no interest in hiring someone with her tainted reputation and history of workplace boundary violations, watching the life she had thrown away for temporary excitement with a coworker who abandoned her the moment his own interests were threatened.